UCLA costs James Franklin his job. Also, Florida goes out and stuns Texas. It's Arch Manning a bust after all. Iowa State losing their first game of the season. Alabama rebounds. We're bringing that down and much more. Also previewing all the big matchups we got coming up in Week 7. The College Football Show with Anthony Balester is starting right now. And we're back on the Anthony Balester YouTube channel. I'm your host, Anthony Balester. Make sure that you're following us across all social medias. We're on Twitter at Balester555 and Instagram and TikTok at Anthony Balester. Make sure if you're watching this video, you also subscribe to the YouTube channel. The more subscribers we have, the more and the better content we can bring you guys. Also, make sure that you like and share this video. If you're watching this, you're most likely a football fan. That means you probably have other family and friends that are also football fans. So make sure you send that to them. The more people that watch it, the more likely they're to subscribe. And the more likes we get, the better it helps with the algorithm. Well, let's get into it. We're going to start off with what was the biggest news from last week in college football, and that was UCLA. UCLA went out there and had the shock of the season. They were probably the worst team this year so far in the Power 4 conference level. They already fired their coach, Foster. It seemed like they couldn't get anything done. They were losing to Group of 5 programs, and it didn't seem like there was no way up from here. They were 0-4. It seemed like there was no way they'd be able to get a win throughout the season, and they ended up going out and stunning Penn State. They beat Penn State 42-37. Now, Penn State was already coming off their first loss a week ago, where they lost a very close game in overtime to Oregon. That game could have went either way. They nearly almost came back. They forced overtime, and then Drew Aller, being Drew Aller, turned the ball over at a very pivotal, crucial time. Now, that's been kind of like the downfall and the knock on Drew Aller and Penn State. They don't beat the high-profile, high-ranked teams. James Franklin usually loses those games or figures out a way to lose those games. And so far in his career as a multiple-year starter, Drew Aller has been the guy to where in those situations, when you need a big play, he doesn't make that good play. Now, his stats overall, when you look at him throughout the seasons, has usually been pretty good. But he usually gets those stats against the unranked teams or the non-ranked in the top 5, top 10 teams. Now, when he goes up against these teams like Oregon and others, he struggles. So he doesn't play good in the big games, and he doesn't play good in the clutch moments. So coming off that loss, we thought, okay, well, Penn State being Penn State, James Franklin will get those players to rally. Drew Aller will rebound and respawn and have a very good rebound game, blowing out a really poor program in UCLA. Well, that wasn't the case at all. It looks like that loss kind of hung over them, and they were still hung over from that devastating loss to Oregon. They were very flat. They couldn't get anything done on offense at the beginning of the game. And what UCLA has done, after making the coaching changes, their new coach that's been coaching Nico Iamaleava is now going into his strengths and using Nico the way he should be used. Utilizing his legs and his mobility and making him that true dual threat quarterback that we know Nico Iamaleava can be. Nico was dicing Penn State all over the field. I believe he ended up with 5 total touchdowns, 2 on the air, and 3 in the running department. So they couldn't stop him no matter what. Every time they got close, Nico was able to run it in there. He was also making really accurate throws in that red zone area. Throws where his receivers were really covered. Penn State tried to do a good job, but they didn't have an answer for Nico's legs, and they obviously didn't have an answer for the perfect passes. And some of those passes that Nico Iamaleava was throwing, there's really not a defense that can stop those passes. But again, for James Franklin to lose this game the way he did, Penn State had to rally and come back and make some pivotal defensive stops, and Drew Aller had to make some good plays in the fourth quarter just to make the score what it was. But it still wasn't enough. They were up by like 2 or 3 possessions at points in this game. So you got to give credit to UCLA. Nico Iamaleava looks like that top recruit. Maybe he's finally got a coach that could use and utilize his skill set. But wow, when you looked at these two guys, Nico looked like the better quarterback. And that's not something that we would have thought heading into the season. And that's not something we would have thought about Drew Aller even just a couple weeks ago. I don't know where Penn State goes from here. Now with these two losses, we know once you hit your third loss, you're pretty much eliminated from the college football playoffs. So now Penn State would have to win out. And they got some very hard games on their schedule. And we already know Penn State struggles with those top-ranked teams. So I feel like now, while it may not be over mathematically, I feel like Penn State's season is already over. And that's crazy coming into the season. We thought they were one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country. With all the players that they brought back, with the receivers they brought in the transfer portal, we thought that this team could kind of be like what we saw out of Ohio State last year, where they had the great running back duo. They were supposed to have a really good defense. Now, their defense has still made plays. Dennis Sutton has played really well. I think some of their corners and safeties with Wheatley and others have played really well. But overall, in the clutch moments, they haven't been able to play good. And now they lay a dud against UCLA. This is the type of loss where you got to look at your head coach. Either the head coach is allowing this team to be hungover and still be upset and thinking about the week ago, or he's not doing his best job to get them to focus on the task at hand. It's got to be one or the other. Either he was allowing his players to not be focused, or he was teaching them to not be focused. Most likely he wasn't doing his best job to get this team to focus on what they needed to focus. When you lose this game, yeah, you can blame the players, but with a coaching staff like James Franklin, he's got to get something done. You know, you can't allow your players to play like this, yeah, be it on the road, but against a really poor UCLA team who can't even beat group of five teams at this juncture. So this is not a good look for James Franklin. Yeah, he's had a lot of devastating losses before, but at least there were 2 teams like Ohio State and Oregon. This type of loss really puts him, I think, on the hot seat. Now, while I don't believe he gets fired or anything like that, but now this raises questions. If this season just completely goes and derails, he may be coaching for his job next season. This is a program that does have the talent now to not play like this. You know, you're a program that gets top recruits. You're getting good transfers. You've had talented quarterbacks, and for some reason, they're just not getting it done. Before, you weren't getting it done in the clutch moments, but now you're not getting it done when you're expected to win. And that's one thing we're always able to say about Penn State. They always won the game that they were supposed to win. Now, if they're not winning those games, then where is this program really heading? They're at an all-time low in the James Franklin era. I still think James Franklin is the good coach. But now, did he lose the locker room? Is he not getting his players to focus when they need to focus? So this is going to be a tough game for them to rebound. Maybe they could pull a page out of Kalen DeBoer's book when they got absolutely destroyed by Florida State. A lot of people were saying those same questions, and they were able to use that loss as motivation. The only difference is that was 1 loss compared to 2. So now Penn State really has no room for error the rest of the season, and they got some really, really tough matchups in conference play to go on. And both their losses now were in conference. Oregon and UCLA are both Big Ten programs. Alabama's loss wasn't in conference. And we know when it comes to conference standings and trying to play for a conference title, it goes by your conference standings and your win-loss record within your conference. Now Penn State, after losing to UCLA, is now going to be down 2 games in the conference. So Drew Aller, his draft stock is plummeted. A guy who looked like a top 10 talent is now probably going to be looking at a 2nd, 3rd round pick. When you look at the rest of this program, a program that was supposed to go to the national championship or at least the semifinals, probably doesn't even make the playoffs. And this is an expanded 12-team playoffs, and Penn State might be on the outside looking in. So this season has gone disastrous for them, and I don't see any way this gets fixed unless they go on an ultimate run. But still, this is going to be a very tough team to make the playoffs. Even if they do win out, then they're going to have to play like an Ohio State or a top team in the conference championship. And yeah, you don't want to penalize a team for making the conference championship, but at the end of the day, if they lose that one, now you're looking at a 3-loss Penn State team with one of the worst losses to UCLA among all the teams. And when we're talking about tiebreakers and splitting hairs between programs, it's going to be hard for Penn State to win that argument. Now let's talk about another team who was highly ranked preseason, who has really disappointed, and that's Texas. Florida was able to shock Texas, beating them 29-21. Now, yes, you could blame Arch Manning. Arch Manning has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the SEC this year, a guy who was a Heisman favorite, who was supposed to be one of the top quarterbacks not only in the SEC, but just one of the top overall players in college football, has completely disappointed beyond belief. There's playing bad, there's playing less than what you were expecting them, and then there's doing what Arch Manning has done. Arch Manning has looked like a shell of what he thought, and what's surprising is he had starts last year when Quinn Ewers was hurt, and he played pretty decently. He hasn't even looked as good as that. So I don't know what's wrong with Arch Manning. He seems to have no confidence. He's throwing with a throwing motion that doesn't even look like his natural. A throwing motion, he seems to be second-guessing himself. Now, I will say in this game, Florida's defense was absolutely unbelievable. Tyreek Sapp, Banks, and that defensive line, those linebackers, really were giving Texas fits. Texas offensive line, it doesn't matter what quarterback was behind that offensive line, they probably would have struggled in that game. So Arch Manning, yeah, he needs some of the blame with the turnovers and ultimately just how he's looked all season. He hasn't looked really great in a lot of these games. The only game he's looked good against is when he's playing against teams who are Group of 5 or FCS teams, and we know that those teams have no NFL players or players that probably wouldn't even make a Texas program. These are guys who won't even be able to make a Power 4 conference team, and those are the only games where Arch Manning's been able to play good. Arch Manning's still making plays with his legs. He still has a throw here and there where he definitely makes you turn your head and say, okay, well, there's the Arch Manning that we thought. But ultimately, there's too much bad that definitely outweighs the little bit of good he's doing. Now, in this game, I'm not going to put all the blame on him. The main blame is the offensive line and the running game. Texas hasn't been able to get a consistent running game all season. Their star running backs have been hurt, and then even when their running backs have played, they haven't been able to get anything done. So you're talking about an Arch Manning who hasn't been able to get the offensive line protection. He hasn't been able to get the running game to take some of the pressure off. So the defenses know that it's all on Arch Manning. So it makes the game plan a lot easier for them, and it makes the game planning that much harder for Arch Manning. So there's a lot more on his plate than was expected. But at the end of the day, there's just too many bad throws. There's a lot of other quarterbacks who are doing a lot more with the same amount or less. Texas has, for the most part, a good defense. So their defense has been putting Arch Manning in a position to succeed with better field position, more time of possession, forcing turnovers, forcing 3-and-outs, and Arch Manning just hasn't been able to take advantage of it. You got 16 teams in the SEC, 16 starting quarterbacks each and every week. And for the most part, Arch Manning's been somewhere between the 13th to 16th best quarterback in the SEC each and every week. So the guy's not even being an above average starting quarterback in his own conference. So all the talk about going to the NFL has a subside. I believe if he was to go to the NFL this year, which that's not going to happen, but even if he was, he's got to be a day 3 pick. There's no way he's a first, second, or third round pick. At best, just because of the talent that he has and because of the name, maybe he goes early 4th round, early 5th round. But we saw a guy like Shedeur Sanders. Yeah, he had the maturity issues, but we saw a quarterback that had really good success in college go in the 5th round. So what does that say about Arch Manning? Arch Manning has been not nearly as good as a Shedeur Sanders. Yeah, he doesn't have the maturity issues, but he just doesn't have the quality of play that Shedeur Sanders has. At this point, I think Shedeur Sanders is a much better prospect than what Arch Manning is right now. Arch Manning's got to come back to college another year and hope, after another offseason, maybe he can find his confidence back. If not, this may go completely in a direction that nobody saw. If he plays the rest of the season like this, they don't make the college football playoffs, which I don't think they will. Which we can say the same thing like we said about Penn State. But Penn State, though, they have the loss to UCLA. That's a very bad loss. At least Texas has losses to the best team in the country in Ohio State, and a decent, that's a tail of Florida's team that has had their struggles, but we know that they do have the talent. That's not as bad as what Penn State's going to be up against. But at the end of the day, Texas has a tough schedule, and they can't lose another game or they're going to be out. So just like Penn State, Texas is probably not in the playoffs. Now, we're in a scenario where if Arch Manning plays the rest of the season like what he has, they don't make the playoffs. They obviously are going to give Arch Manning another season to redeem himself. But they have a top quarterback recruit coming in next year. If Arch Manning struggles the way he is now next year, I can see a scenario where a year from now, or maybe even sooner, beginning of 2026, Arch Manning gets pulled for that 5-star freshman quarterback, and Arch Manning now is going to not only be not coming out in the draft next year, but won't even be coming out the year after because he'll be hitting the transfer portal and playing for probably a much less talented, still probably a Power 4, but Arch Manning will probably be playing for one of the lower tier SEC, Big Ten, or maybe even going to an easier conference in the ACC or Big 12 school in 2027. So you may not even see an Arch Manning in the NFL until 2028 if this continues to go the way it does. Because there's no way Texas could keep trotting him on the field if this is going to be the result that we get. They'll obviously give him the rest of the year. He'll have all offseason and all next season to rebound. But if he's playing like this and Texas may be looking at back-to-back years and not making the playoffs, Steve Sarkisian is not going to keep putting him out there, running him onto the football field, and doing a disservice to the rest of the program and the rest of the players. So if Arch Manning doesn't get this fixed within the next year, I can see him getting benched for that 5-star quarterback, hitting the transfer portal, and playing for another school in 2027. And that's something that a lot of people, nobody would have predicted heading into the season. But let's give credit to Florida. DJ Lagway still had his struggles, but definitely played better. I thought Florida's offensive line held up really well against a good Texas defense. And Florida State's defense with their secondary, with Devin Moore and others, and with that defensive line that we spoke about, linebackers, they showed why, while they may have struggled offensively, their defenses is one of the top probably 10 elite defenses in college football. Now let's go over to a couple of the other games we had. We had Cincinnati stunning Iowa State. Now, the main surprise when we predicted this, I did think Iowa State would win, but I did not know that their corners were going to be that hurt. They lost their top 2 players in the secondary for the rest of the season. That's really, really tough to rebound. Williams and Cooper is out for the year. So now they're playing backup secondaries. And when any team loses their top 2 secondary, it's not like, we lost 2 starters for the year and one was on offense, one was on defense. It was 2 players that predominantly play in the same position. So that's devastating when any team loses that. And then when you go up against the Cincinnati team, who has great receivers, they got one of the best quarterbacks in Brandon Sorsby in college football, who's now looking like a top 15 Heisman candidate. It's going to be tough for them to overcome. I think Rocco Beck did the best he could to put this team on his back. He showed why he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football, but he can only do so much when the secondary is getting gashed. So we got to give credit to Cincinnati for pulling out this win. And I was very impressed with Cincinnati, and they look like a team that's going to make a good run to potentially win the Big 12 conference and maybe make the playoffs. And we know the Big 12 always has a surprise team that maybe either wins the conference or is right there in the thick of it to the end. And maybe that's year at Cincinnati. Their quarterback's unbelievable. They got great running backs. Yeah, I think their defense can get better, but now they're getting Dante Corleone, their star defensive tackle, who's starting to get healthier each and every week. If he becomes a force and becomes what we know he could be at his full strength, that's going to be a tough team to beat. So I'm not going to discredit Iowa State. They're still having a great season. They're still a great team, but you can only do so much when you have devastating injuries like the way that they've had. And Cincinnati, let's give them all the credit. They took advantage of it. We're able to exploit that weakness, and we're able to get plays not only in the running game and in the passing game. Then we had Alabama, who finally got revenge on Vanderbilt, beating them 30-14. Now, this game was much closer than what the score indicated. Vanderbilt forced Ty Simpson into a turnover early on. Diego Pavia was doing Diego Pavia things, completing throws, running all over Alabama. We know Alabama can struggle against mobile quarterbacks. Vanderbilt's defense was making good plays. They were sacking Ty Simpson multiple times. They were stopping the run. And then in the second half, Ty Simpson showed why he's been, outside of week 1, been one of the best quarterbacks in college football. This guy as a pure passer is unbelievable. The throws he makes, the progressions that he goes through, the reads that he's made, looking off safeties, throwing in the double coverage, putting the ball where only the receivers can. He's really showing, what Jalen Milroe couldn't do. Jalen Milroe was an athletic quarterback who can make explosive plays on the run that Ty Simpson can't do, but he couldn't make the throws that Ty Simpson has. And we know Kalen DeBoer, a coach that coached Michael Penix Jr. with the receivers that he had at Washington. That's the type of system and quarterback that he needs to flourish. Now you see guys like Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton really start to have some good success because now this passing game is going. They got Jam Miller back for a second week. He's finally starting to help now. So now Alabama's starting to get a good running game going. That was something they really haven't had for the last pretty much this season and for a large part of last season. If Jam Miller's going to be able to play like that, it's going to be really hard to stop this offense if Ty Simpson, right now in college football, is the best pure passer. What he's played, he has established himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the country, and he's now a top 5 Heisman candidate. And if he continues to play like this each and every week, with all the big games they have coming up against these ranked matchups, he's going to have so many great games and so many great defenses and great teams to showcase himself. If he continues to showcase himself this way, I can see him definitely being in New York at the end of the year for the Heisman Trophy ceremony and maybe give himself a good chance, along with Dante Moore and others, to potentially win it. Alabama has really rebounded. The job Kalen DeBoer has done, getting his team to focus after a loss. This is something that James Franklin should have done after they lost to Oregon. But it goes to show you what Kalen DeBoer could do, how no matter what, they're not going to give up. And all the wrongs that he had written about him and all the wrongs that Ty Simpson had has completely been erased. Ty Simpson's draft stock is skyrocketing. A guy who looked like was an undrafted free agent who was going to need a couple years of college is now moving himself up to maybe being a top 100 draft pick. So we'll see how this season continues. They still got some tougher games, so we'll see if they continue this success. But, man, Alabama looks like the Alabama team that we thought potentially they could have been preseason. Vanderbilt, they're still a good program. They're still having probably the best season maybe they've ever had or have had in a long time. Diego Pavia is still one of the most exciting players in college football. Their offense and their passing game is much better than it was last year. Their defense is really, really good. What Lee has done with this program can't be underestimated. Any top program that's going to be needed, a coach is going to be looking at him, the culture that he's established at Vanderbilt, but he's a Vanderbilt guy. I don't see him wanting to leave. So I think Vanderbilt's still going to have a successful season. They just at this day weren't better than Alabama. And 9 times out of 10, Alabama is going to be the more talented team. And Alabama wasn't going to let themselves choke like they did a year ago. Now, the last game we're going to be talking about before we get into our picks, we had Miami, who beats Florida State 28-22. Now, this game I'm going to say is going to be the opposite of what we said about the last game. This game wasn't as close as the score indicated. Miami completely went out and dominated Florida State for the most part of the game. And then Florida State started to make some plays in garbage time. Yeah, you got to give them credit. They almost made a game of it. You know, they were probably an outside kick away, but maybe even upset in Miami. So you got to, talk about Miami and the fact that they gave up such a huge lead. I believe that they were up 28-3. And then Florida State's defense completely shut down Carson Beck towards the fourth in the fourth quarter. And their offense was able to get going. But at the end of the day, what Miami has offensively and defensively, you got guys like Malachi Toney. You got guys like C.J. Daniels. They got the best combination of offensive and defensive line. I believe right now they probably got anywhere between the 3rd and 5th best offensive line and maybe the best defensive line in all of college football. And on any given Saturday, it's going to be hard to beat that team in the trenches. And we know that's where football games all start, is the trenches. And when you have a team that has so much of an advantage in the trenches on the offense and defensive side of the ball, it's going to be hard to beat them. Florida State didn't have an answer for Miami's passing game at the start of the game. That really hurt that team. Obviously, Miami and Ruben Bain and then other great pass rushers they have. Ruben Bain's been the best defensive player in all of college football. That's why he's giving himself a good opportunity to be the number 1 pick in the draft next year. So Miami's going to be a tough team to beat. Now, this is a back-to-back losses for Florida State. Losing to Miami shouldn't hurt them that much. We know how good Miami is. But having that combined with the upset they had at Virginia, Florida State now is a program with 2 losses who are now going to have to be flawless going forward. Carson Beck looks like the Georgia Carson Beck. So Miami right now looks like one of the toughest teams and best teams in the country, and they look like they can make a serious run for the championship. So now let's move on. We got a lot of great picks. This is one of the best weekends in college football. And we're going to start off with number 7, Indiana, going on the road to number 3, Oregon. Oregon's a 7.5-point favorite. This is going to be a great matchup, mainly because we get to see potentially 2 of the top quarterbacks in the NFL draft. We had a lot of junior and senior quarterbacks coming into this year that were like, okay, well, who's going to break out, who's not? You had guys like Drew Aller. You had, other guys like Garrett Nussmeier. And you had some other quarterbacks as well, Cade Klubnik, and where everybody had a different pick of which was going to be that quarterback that emerged. Well, so far this year, it's been Fernando Mendoza. The guy's big. He's strong. He really reads defenses really well. He makes really pinpoint accurate throws that can't really defend. What we saw him do against Illinois' defense was unbelievable. He made Illinois' defense look like, like a Miami, Ohio like type defense. Kind of a defense that doesn't belong at the Power Four conference level. So Fernando Mendoza has been unbelievable with his accuracy and his pocket passing. He can move a little bit, but with his size, he becomes a hard quarterback to sack, being over 6'5", over 220 pounds. He's a hard guy to bring down. But then when we look at Oregon, they have their own quarterback who's established himself as a top draft pick, and that's Dante Moore. The only difference is Dante Moore is a redshirt sophomore. He's one of the youngest quarterbacks of the guys we talk about in the draft. The guy's born in 2005, whereas some of these other quarterbacks we talked about, Kate Klubnik, 2003, Fernando Mendoza, 2003, Garrett Nussmeier, 2002, and you got Dante Moore out there who's playing better than all of them, and he's born in 2005. The guy's barely 20 years old, and yeah, he had the one season starting at UCLA, but he really didn't get to learn much from that. Now he's looking like a guy who's been starting for 3+ years, a guy who looks like he's a 22-year-old senior, and that's how he's playing. He's quick. He's able to make throws on the run. He's able to really, be super accurate and beat defenses with his mind and his accuracy. He reminds me a lot like C.J. Stroud, how C.J. Stroud was just that pinpoint accurate pocket passer who has some legs when needed. And that's kind of like how Dante Moore has played. Also, both these defenses have played really well. I think Oregon's defense has been slightly better with the players that they have, like Monteo Uongale, Washington, that defensive tackle, the linebacking play that this team has gotten. They're very young at corner. Now, their corners have played really well for their youth, but that's something that Fernando Mendoza is going to try to exploit. But at the end of the day, I think Oregon just got way too many good players. I know Malachi Hughes, the top transfer running back, he transferred to Oregon thinking that he was going to be the starter, and Oregon ended up having probably 5 running backs that would be starters elsewhere. They got potentially 5 NFL running backs. Now, none of them are probably going to be first or second round picks, but they got 5 guys that could probably all go day 2 or day 3 picks. And because of that, Malachi Hughes now is probably going to redshirt this year or try to redshirt or try to sit out to preserve another year of college football because he can't get on the field because of all these great running backs. So that makes it hard to game plan for when you don't know what running back you're going to get. They rotate them all. So every time they're on offense, they got a fresh running back with fresh legs who's very, not tired. So that allows their running game to have stability and just be able to gash you every time. Because when you got the same defensive line and linebackers that are in there all game, and then you got a fresh running back with fresh legs, it's going to be hard to stop them with the stamina they're able to have at the running game. And then when you look at the receivers, DeCarrion Moore was one of the top recruits. He's kind of like this year's version of Ryan Williams, coming right in as a freshman, dominating for them. They got Bryant and others. Keon Sariq has been the best tight end in college football, so they all also got him. He can block and catch the ball. As we've Oregon also being the home team, has way too much talent, plus the home field advantage. And even though Fernando Mendoza has been one of the top quarterbacks in the country, who's looked like a first-round pick and should be a first-round pick this year, I think Dante Moore has been even better than him. Dante Moore has probably been, in my opinion, the best player in college football this year and should be the Heisman favorite right now and should be the favorite along with Lenore Sellers because, Lenore Sellers hasn't played as great as these guys. Just his talent, subsedes some of his performances and the lack of, quality play that Moore and Mendoza has. But outside of Sellers, Dante Moore has put himself in positions to be the best player in the country, to be the Heisman favorite, and to give a good run for being the number 1 overall pick in the draft with guys like Sellers and Ruben Payne. So Dante Moore has had a successful season you could possibly ask. Now, I think Indiana is too good, and Fernando Mendoza is too good of a quarterback going up against those young corners. With Surratt and Cooper, the receivers he has, that's one of the best duos in college football. 7.5 points is a lot to give up against a team who put up, 60 against Illinois. So I'm going to go with Oregon, no cover. Now we got Ohio State, who's a 14.5-point favorite going on the road to number 17 Illinois. Obviously, Ohio State's number 1 ranked team. I believe even though they won the national championship last year, I think they're better this year. I think Julian Sand is a more accurate, better quarterback than what Will Howard was. Yeah, he doesn't have the legs or the size to do some of the dual threat ability that Will Howard could do. But just as an accurate quarterback, this guy is a redshirt freshman in his first year starting. Yeah, he was a 5-star recruit. If you follow recruiting, you knew he was going to be great. But for him to come right in and pretty much improve each and every week, and now basically almost at the mid-season point of his first year starting, he's already in the conversation and may already be the most accurate quarterback. If he was eligible and they didn't have the rule where you had to go to college for 3 years, and if he was eligible for the draft this year, I believe that he would be above Dante Moore and maybe be even above Norris Sellers and be the top quarterback. The guy reminds me of Joe Burrow with the way he plays the quarterback position, of how accurate he is, the way he goes through his reads. He's unbelievable. And then you got Jeremiah Smith, the best and most talented player in college football, the best receiver. Cardinal Tate, a first-round receiver in this year's draft. No one has a better doing than that. They got multiple running backs with Bo Jackson, the freshman, with C.J. Donaldson. They got a good offensive line, and their defense. They got the best defense in college football. They had the best defense last year, and their defense is even better this year. With Caden Curry, who's really emerged, Edric Houston, McDonald, Keontae Jackson, the best linebacking duo in the league with Arvell Reese and Styles. And then with Caleb Downs, the most talented defensive player playing in the secondary. This team does not have any weaknesses to speak of right now. So this team's way too good. But going on the road as a 14.5 point favorite to an Illinois team who knows they already have a loss, they really can't afford 2 more losses. And being at the home, getting the home field advantage, we know Illinois got a really good defense with Gabe Jacobs and Xavier Scott and the linebackers that this team has, the pass rush that they could put on a quarterback. Obviously, I think that they'll give Julian Sayin some, good matchups and some struggles being a young quarterback against that good defense on the road. We know Luke Altmaier has been one of the top dual threat quarterbacks. He has good receivers at his disposal with the breakout player and Hank Beatty. They got running backs that they rely on. Ohio State, though, is way too talented. Ohio State's going to win this game. But 14.5 points to a really good Illinois team is way too much to give up on the road. If Ohio State was the home team, I would pick them to cover. But since you're going to go on the road, the best team in the country, still, that's a lot of points against a really good Illinois team. So give me Ohio State, no cover. Now we got number 8, Alabama, 2.5 point favorite going on the road to number 14, Missouri. Obviously, the Georgia game was a much tougher matchup, but I believe that this Missouri game is going to be a much harder matchup than Vanderbilt. At least with Vanderbilt, Alabama was the home team. They're not the home team now, and Missouri's probably been better than Vanderbilt was this year. They got the best running back in college football so far this year with Ahmad Hardy. He's looking like he might end up being a first-round pick in a couple years. He's a sophomore, so he can't come out in 2026, but he's definitely looking like the best running back for the 2027 draft class. He's pretty much been the league, the college football leading rusher pretty much every single week. That's why he's got all the top stats among running backs. Alabama can struggle with the run. We know that they give up explosive plays in the running game. Brew Prubella has been one of the true breakout quarterbacks. He was a guy who Penn State used in certain situations as a runner. And now what he's been doing as a passer, he's got the receivers. He's got a great offensive line. Kevin Coleman Jr. is looking like he's emerging as a top receiver in the country. So this team could run the ball on you with their quarterback and their running back, and they could throw the ball on you with Brew Prubella is dual threat ability. He may not be a top 15 Heisman candidate, but he's really close. If he wins this game, he's going to skyrocket up that. So he's been kind of an under-radar quarterback. And then we look at Missouri's defense. We know Missouri always has a great secondary, but the linebacker play that they've gotten, the pass rush play they've gotten, especially out of Damon Wilson, who was a top recruit, who transferred in, he's looking like that top recruit. I believe now he's established himself as a top 50 NFL draft pick. He's one of the top guys in college football in quarterback pressures. But Alabama's offensive line has played a lot better. And I think Ty Simpson, because of what he did against Georgia, should be able to do the same with the receivers he has and the accuracy he has. He should be able to make those same throws against Missouri's good passing defense as well. And I think Caden Proctor and that offensive line will be able to limit Damon Wilson in that pass rush. This game's going to be really close. I think it's going to go back and forth. Alabama's definitely going to give up some big plays to Hardy and Prubella, but I think Ty Simpson, Ryan Williams, and those boys are going to make enough plays and make slightly more plays than they will. I also believe we're going to have 2 good offensive lines, so this may be an offensive matchup. Being on the road, Missouri's definitely going to have a good opportunity to win, but I'm going to go Alabama to win and cover in that one. Now we got number 15, Michigan, going on the road to USC. USC is a 2.5-point favorite. Michigan, Bryce Underwood's improving each and every week. They got some receivers like McCulley that's emerging. Justin Hayes has been one of the most explosive running backs. It's like every time he touches the ball, he's using that 4.2, 4.3 speed to break it for a 50, 60-yard run. He does it each and every week. We know Michigan now with Rod Moore, the safety fully healthy, with the defense that this team has, with Derek Moore, the defensive tackles they have, and the other pass rushers they have. This team has nothing but top 50, top 100 draft picks across their whole defensive line. Plus, they got a great linebacker. So this team doesn't really have any weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball. So the matchup that's going to really determine this is going to be who plays better, Michigan State's defense or USC's offense. Now, Jaden Mavia has been one of the most improved quarterbacks. Malachi Lemon, him with Jordan Tyson has been two of the top 3 receivers with Jeremiah Smith in the country. That guy, every time they need a big play, it's going to him. You can give the ball to him 10-plus times a game, and he's going to make a play off it more often than not. I think Jaden Mavia at this point in time is probably a better quarterback than Bryce Underwood. Now, USC also has a very improved defense. Their pass rushing duo is very good. So you got two teams who got great pass rushing duos. I think Michigan's defense is still better than USC, but I think USC has still a better offense. With Malachi Lemon, Jacoby Lane's getting healthier. They got some other young receivers that they can rely on. And I think being Bryce Underwood, being an 18-year-old quarterback, a freshman, I believe in the Lincoln Riley system, the way that Jaden Mavia has played. I think Mavia is going to make more plays than Bryce Underwood. So I'm going to go with USC to win and cover that one. Now we got number 6, Oklahoma, going on the road to Texas. Texas is a 2.5-point favorite. Texas coming off that loss. We know Steve Sarkisian is not going to have this team be flat. Their defense is going to play really good. This game's going to come down to the health of Oklahoma's quarterback, John Mateer. Before his injury, he was one of the best players in college football. He was the Heisman Trophy favorite, and now he's got the hand injury. He's really pushing to return to practice and to play, but even if he does play, he's going to be coming back obviously sooner than he was supposed to, so he's not going to be close to 100%. And going up against Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill Jr., and the defense that Texas has, plus Texas being the home team, they're going to have the fans going crazy, knowing that this team already has 2 losses where Oklahoma was undefeated, can't afford a loss or 2 to still make the college football playoffs. So Texas is playing for the season. I believe that they have more to play for. I think Oklahoma's defense with Mason Thomas, they're going to give Arch Manning fits. And because Oklahoma's quarterback's not healthy, this is going to be a very, very low-scoring defensive game. I can see Arch Manning having multiple turnovers against Oklahoma's defense, who, again, doesn't have really many weaknesses. They got one of the deepest defensive tackle groups, one of the deepest pass rusher groups. And with Texas's struggles at the offensive line, I think Arch Manning's going to be running for his life and probably making bad plays like he's been all season. So I think we're going to get a low-scoring game. But because Texas is the home team, because Texas is playing for their season, and because of John Mateer's injury, now if John Mateer was healthy, I would easily pick Oklahoma to win this game. But because he's not healthy, he's either going to be out. But I do like their backup quarterback. I think Hawkins is one of the most talented backup quarterbacks. I believe he'll be a good starter in the future. But John Mateer not being in or being in and not being 100% just won't be enough to go on the road to beat a Texas team who's playing for everything. So give me Texas to win and cover in that one. Now we got number 10, Georgia, who's a 3.5-point favorite going on the road to Auburn. This is going to be some good matchups with the players-wise. We get Cam Coleman, one of the top receivers in college football, going up against Georgia's good corners, whether it's Robertson or Everett on him. That's going to be a good matchup to watch. We get 2 quarterbacks who are dual threat guys, 2 guys that are probably right now better runners than they are throwers. So we get to see Jackson Arnold versus Gunnar Stockton. That's a very good matchup to watch. We know Auburn and Georgia both got good defenses with NFL players. Georgia with C.J. Allen, one of the top linebackers. Auburn with Kendrick Falk, who's probably going to go top 10 in the draft. He will probably be able to pass rush Gunnar Stockton. But again, Gunnar Stockton's mobility will be able to negate Falk in some of that pass rush they have. Now, obviously, Auburn's got good corners, but Georgia with Zachariah Branch and others, they got good receivers. Georgia's just too good of a team, and I believe right now I trust Gunnar Stockton more than I do Jackson Arnold. And I also trust Georgia's defense as a whole right now more than I trust Auburn's defense as a whole. So I'm going to go with Georgia, knowing that they already have one loss. I know Auburn's playing for their season as well, but Georgia's just way too good of a team. These are games that they win. Unless if Georgia and Kirby Smart's playing against Alabama, they typically win these games. So I'm going to go with Georgia to win and cover in that one. Now we have another SEC matchup. We have South Carolina going on the road to number 11 LSU. LSU is a 9.5-point favorite. That point spread is really, really, really high. And we know Garrett Nussmeier has had his struggles. He's been having his inaccuracies. He's been not as pinpoint as he was the start of the season. We also know LSU hasn't been able to get a consistent running game. They've been relying on the 18-year-old freshman Harlem Berry. There are other guys like Durham hasn't been able to flourish. They got some good receivers at their disposal, which should really help them. We know South Carolina is a team that they have the talent, but I don't know if it's a coaching issue or what. But for some reason, their talent hasn't been able to play the way that they should play. Nick Harbor is 6'5" and runs probably a 4.2, 4.3, and he's only got like 9 to 15 receptions. You got to get him more involved. They haven't been able to get consistent run game either. And Lenora Sellers, who's the most talented quarterback in college football, they haven't been able to put him in favorable situations. And I believe that he has shown improvement in accuracy, but I believe that this offensive coaching system, I believe the offensive coordinator hasn't been able to get his starter players in favorable positions. And we know with LSU, with their improvement on defense, some of their offensive players, have struggled, and they had some injuries on defense, but they still got starter players on defense with Masoon Delaney, who's looking like a first-round corner. Hussey at safeties looked awesome. DJ Pickett's one of the most talented true freshmen. He's a 6'4", 6'5" nightmare matchup at that quarterback position with Weeks. He should be healthier in this matchup. He's been injured the last couple of weeks, so they'll get him back. So I believe that LSU coming off that loss to Ole Miss, they're going to be very motivated to rebound from that. We know Brian Kelly usually rebounds really well off of a loss, but that's way too many points to give up to a team that's got Dylan Stewart. We know Dylan Stewart's going to give that offensive line fits, and LSU's offensive line hasn't looked great over the last couple of weeks. I think that's what's caused some of Garrett Nussmeier's struggles. If he has protection that's kept clean, he could dissect any defense. But I believe Dylan Stewart will give that offensive line fits. He's one of the top defensive players in all college football. I believe that LSU's defense will make good plays against Sellers and Nick Harbor. So this could be a defensive game, but I'm going to pick LSU to win. But there's no way I can trust LSU when you have so much talent on South Carolina, talent that you just can't teach that Nick Harbor and Lenora Sellers have. And we know on any given Saturday that if those guys are clicking, they can beat anybody. And this was a game last year that was very, very close. So I'm going to go with LSU no cover. Now we got Florida coming off that emotional win against Texas, playing the other Texas program. Texas on the road against number 5 Texas A&M, and Texas A&M is a 7.5-point favorite. We got two teams that got great offensive lines, two teams that are going to have really good defenses, but at this point in time, I'm going to trust Texas A&M to win the game, but no cover. I'm not going to pick a team to cover 7.5 points when the Florida's defense is going to be playing that good. But Texas A&M has a really good offensive line, one of the best in the country. So Florida won't be able to get the same pass rush they did against Texas because Texas' offensive line was atrocious. So Texas A&M will be able to protect a lot better, negate some of that Florida defense. And Marcel Reed is right now a much better quarterback throwing the ball and running the ball than DJ Lagway. So I trust Marcel Reed more, and I love the wide receivers they have. Mario Craver and KC Concepcion is unbelievable, especially Mario Craver, the 19-year-old breakout star for them who played really decently last year, has taken his game to a whole nother level. He looks like a future first-round pick. He's a guy that can take a 5-yard scheme play and take it for a 60-yard gain. And Texas A&M's look like one of the top teams on both sides of the ball in the country. So their offensive line, plus being at home, we know Texas A&M's got one of the top home field advantages in the country. So between that, the offensive line, and the fact that I can't trust DJ Lagway to go on the road to beat a team as quality as Texas A&M. Marcel Reed's been the better player. He's been a top 10 quarterback in the country, a Heisman Trophy candidate at this point, and that's going to only continue to go up. Plus, we know Texas A&M's got 2 or 3 running backs that they can rely on, so they're going to be able to get plays in the running game and the passing game. So I believe that Texas A&M wins, but we know Texas A&M can play close. They've had a lot of close games, but they usually typically win. So give me Texas no cover. Now, at the end of the show, we got 2 Big 12 games to break down. We got number 21, Arizona State, going on the road to Utah. Utah, surprisingly, is a 5.5-point favorite. This is a very tough game to predict. Probably the toughest game to predict of the 10 games that we're talking about. I'm going to go with Arizona State to upset. Arizona State's a team that already has a loss. Utah already has a loss. So these 2 teams are playing for pretty much their playoff hopes, because we know in the Big 12, it's hard for a team to have 2 losses to make it, unless if you win the Big 12 championship. And with this being a conference game, this game's going to have a lot of implications on who does play in that Big 12 game. Now, we know Utah, their loss was to a Big 12 team against Texas Tech. Arizona State hasn't lost in conference because their loss was against an SEC team in Mississippi State. Utah has an unbelievable defense, but Arizona State may not be as good, but has a much underrated defense. And we saw what they did a couple weeks ago when they came back against Josh Hoover. We know that this team has a surprisingly good defense, a much better defense than what they had last year. They returned all their players from a year ago, and all those guys who returned have taken their game up to a next level. Hanby has looked like one of the top corners, the shutdown corners in college football. Faribault and Fiat has been one of the top defensive line, with the pass rush they get from those guys and the run stops that they get. Those guys have been unbelievable. So I believe that we're going to have 2 good defenses. Yeah, Utah will be slightly better, but I think Arizona State just has a much better offense. Well, Raleigh Brown and the running backs, they could go 3 deep at running back. Mainly, obviously, Raleigh Brown is their main guy, but they can go 3 deep to keep him fresh. Sam Levitt has really improved as the season goes on. The plays that he can make on the running plays with the dual threat, the plays that he can make on the run when you rush him, the throws that he can make on the run, the sidearm throws, Sam Levitt's been unbelievable. I do believe he needs another year of college before he goes to the NFL, but just right now as a college player, this guy's been unstoppable. And then Jordan Tyson, besides Jeremiah Smith, has been probably the best receiver in college football and has really separated himself from all the other 2026 receivers. Now, we know Jeremiah Smith can't come out until 2027, so when you talk about just receivers in this year's draft, Jordan Tyson has really separated himself from everybody else. This guy puts his team on his back each and every week. Yeah, they don't have a consistent guy on the opposite side of him, but it doesn't matter if you double or triple team him. He's going to make big plays each and every week. And I believe Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson are much better than Devin Dampier, who we know can make plays with his legs, but hasn't been able to make the plays with his arm that Sam Levitt can. And we saw what Texas Tech was able to do to him when he took out his legs and he had multiple turnovers. And I also believe that Utah doesn't have great wide receivers right now, particularly when you're going up against a team who may have one of the top 2 best receivers in college football. So I'm going to trust Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson over Devin Dampier and those receivers that Utah has. And when you look at, Utah has a slightly better defense and isn't by much. The biggest gap in talent in this game is going to be the quarterback and receiver combo that Arizona State has compared to what Utah has. I know they're going on the road, but I believe that they'll win this game close, maybe by 2 to 4 points. So I'm going to go with Arizona State to win in the upset. Now we got a BYU, number 18 BYU, who surprisingly is only a 1.5-point favorite to Arizona. Now, Arizona has been a much improved team. They're playing this year like we thought that they'd play last year. They've been having some receivers emerge in the absence of them losing McMillan. They got a really good running back who's explosive, who's a really emerged for them. Noah Fafita is one of the most accurate quarterbacks in college football. But I'm going to go with BYU to win this one. BYU has one of the top defenses in the Big 12. They got players at every single level with Fabian Johnson at corner, the defensive line that this team has, the linebackers they have. Now, they did pick up some injuries last week against West Virginia. We'll have to see who's going to be healthy and who's not for that defense. But then when you look at offensively, look at the offense that BYU has. Buckmeyer has been one of the top, not only freshmen, but one of the top most accurate quarterbacks in college football. He's not played like a freshman. And then the combination that they have at running back and receiver with Roberts and Martin, you can't stop those guys, because if you try to stop the receiver, then they're going to run the ball on you. If you try to stop Martin in the running game, then they're going to throw it deep to Chase Roberts. Chase Roberts is a guy who gets a lot of explosive plays. He gets like 15 to 20 yards, it seems like, on every catch. And then when you try to line your defensive backs further back there, then they're going to run it with Martin. And then you got Buckmeyer, who's making good decisions. So, yeah, they're going on the road. We know Arizona has got good coaching. We know they got good players. They got some good defensive players as well. BYU is just way too much more talented, and that's why BYU so far is undefeated. Yeah, BYU played a really close game, closer than we thought a couple of weeks ago with Colorado, but I believe BYU is just really that good, and I don't think Arizona is the team that's going to be able to upset BYU. So I'm surprised. I thought that point spread would be at least 3.5 to 5.5, but I'm going to go BYU to cover that point spread and beat Arizona to continue their undefeated streak. That's going to do it for this episode. Make sure you're following us across all social medias. We're on Twitter at Balester555, Instagram and TikTok, Anthony Balester. Make sure, if you're watching this video, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, if you're watching this, make sure you share this with all the other football fans that are friends or families. Also, make sure to like this video. It helps with the algorithm. And thank you for tuning in. We had a great show this week. We'll be back next week. Like I said, each week we do a college football show on Tuesdays, and we do an NFL show on Wednesdays. So you're definitely going to want to stay tuned. Each week we'll be breaking down all the big games that happened the week before, while also previewing all of the games to come back. So we'll be back next week to break down all these big games. We know we're going to have some upsets and some crazy things that happen on the football field this week. So we're going to be bringing that down while also previewing all the big matchups we have the week after. So you're not going to want to miss it. Make sure that you stay tuned and enjoy the college football this Saturday.